This topographical map of the ancient Near East highlights the Levant. The Levant is the geographic corridor along the eastern Mediterranean coast, and in the early 6th century BC, it served as a volatile friction zone. Trapped between the expanding Neo-Babylonian Empire to the north and Egypt to the south, sat Judah, a vassal state vacillating between the two powers. Under Jehoiakim and Zedekiah, Judah repeatedly rebelled. These miscalculations exhausted Babylonian patience, triggering direct military retaliation. King Nebuchadnezzar II mobilized his forces with the specific objective of total subjugation to secure Babylonian dominance over the Egyptian border. The Neo-Babylonian Empire possessed the wealth and heavy engineering capability to execute this goal systematically. The book of Ezekiel, in chapter 7, verse 2, records a specific prophetic warning. The end is come upon the four corners of the land. This text functions as a geographically literal blueprint of the military campaign Nebuchadnezzar began to execute. This timeline graphic of the campaign from 588 to 586 BC shows an operation divided into three distinct phases. First, peripheral isolation. Second, scorched earth logistics. And finally, central starvation. The fall of Judah resulted from a highly calculated sequence of operations, a systematic exercise in military engineering designed to completely erase a sovereign entity. In 588 BC, the Babylonian army crossed into northern and central Judah. They bypassed the capital initially, executing targeted strikes against the region's fortified outer hard targets. The first major obstacle was Lachish, the kingdom's second most important fortress. Lachish was strategically positioned to control the Shephelah Plateau, a transitional zone of sloping hills that protected the approach to the central mountains. Overcoming Lachish's vertical, high-ground defenses required massive logistical coordination and heavy engineering. The Babylonian army executed a precise mechanical sequence. Formations of archers laid down suppressive cover fire, keeping the defenders pinned, while specialized laborers constructed massive earthen siege ramps directly against the sheer stone walls. Once the ramps reached the walls, Babylonian forces deployed heavy battering ramps up the inclines to physically shatter the fortification masonry. We know these precise tactics were used because they are recorded directly in Babylonian military cuneiform records. Despite a determined resistance, the fortress fell. The survivors were deported, and the entire city was burned to the ground, serving as a visible warning to any neighboring towns considering resistance. Concurrently, Babylonian forces laid siege to Azekah, another vital high-ridge fortress in Judah's defensive network. The topography here presented steep, highly defensible slopes. To gain height superiority, the besiegers outmaneuvered Ezekah's defenders using advanced, mobile siege towers. They breached the stone perimeter and leveled the site. The military pressure continued down the line, crushing smaller central towns like Hebron, Debir, and Bethel in rapid succession. By destroying Lachish and Ezekah, Nebuchadnezzar achieved his Phase 1 objective. He severed Judah's main lines of communication and completely isolated Jerusalem from its outer defenses. Moving into early 587 BC, the strategy shifted. With the major fortresses removed, Babylon transitioned to an asymmetrical logistical war against the open countryside. Nebuchadnezzar's forces executed a strict scorched earth policy, a military strategy that involves destroying anything that might be useful to the enemy, targeting the agrarian foundation of the kingdom. Troops systematically burned and destroyed critical economic targets, including vast vineyards, ancient olive groves, and active agricultural lands. This devastation supplied the Babylonian occupying army with immediate resources, while guaranteeing that Jerusalem could not be resupplied from its own hinterlands. The fires triggered widespread demographic panic. Stripped of their land, rural civilians fled the burning countryside, funneled toward the perceived safety of Jerusalem's walls. This influx of desperate refugees rapidly swelled Jerusalem's population. Babylon had weaponized the local demographics, turning the kingdom's own citizens into a severe drain on the capital's already limited resource stockpiles. Simultaneously, operations expanded into the southern theater, specifically the Negev, the arid desert region that formed the final southern frontier. Babylon targeted less fortified but highly strategic settlements like Meresha, capturing them to install permanent garrisons and forcing the local population into hard labor. The military logic of this southern blockade was absolute. It prevented any Judahites from escaping south and entirely sealed off the potential for Egyptian reinforcements moving north. By destroying the food supply, overpopulating the capital, and severing every escape route, Nebuchadnezzar had engineered an inescapable trap. By late 587 BC, Babylon turned its entire military apparatus toward the political and religious center, Jerusalem. To lock down the city, Babylonian soldiers constructed an unbroken ring of siege lines and elevated watchtowers, entirely encircling the capital. The siege developed into a grueling 18-month standoff of attrition. The weaponization of famine worked exactly as planned. The refugee crisis from the countryside rapidly exhausted the city's grain and water stockpiles. Inside the walls, the society collapsed. Severe starvation and disease triggered profound desperation, leading to violent infighting among the trapped defenders. Compounding the physical starvation was the overwhelming psychological pressure. Day and night, the trapped population could see the relentless presence of Babylonian siege engines looming just outside their gates. Jerusalem's physical walls managed to hold for a year and a half, but the city was defeated from the inside out, broken by calculated logistical starvation long before the stone gave way. Finally, in 586 BC, the defense failed. Babylonian heavy engineering breached the weakened fortifications, shattering the stone and pouring into the starving city. The breach initiated the systematic dismantlement of Judah's institutional identity. Soldiers torched the royal palace, burned major civic structures to the ground, and destroyed the Temple of Solomon. Babylonian forces moved through the ruins to eliminate the leadership class, executing key civic officials and military commanders on site. The final strategic maneuver was population control. Nebuchadnezzar ordered the mass deportation of the surviving upper classes, skilled craftsmen and artisans, to Babylon. This forced exile initiated the Babylonian captivity, the period of mandatory detention for the surviving population, marking the definitive end of the Kingdom of Judah as an independent state. Nebuchadnezzar's campaign remains a premier case study in ancient force projection. Through the application of engineering, scorched earth logistics, and mass deportation, Babylon dismantled a sovereign nation and permanently altered the geopolitical landscape of the ancient Near East.